My son's voice cut through me like glass. "You'll make the wedding awkward. Mom, you're not invited." That was the moment something inside me shattered. After everything I had given, after years of being his anchor, he erased me with one sentence. "My name is Adeline Mercer." And what happened next turned their perfect wedding into a story no one would ever forget. The phone rang with that heavy silence on the other end that tells you more than words ever could. I pressed it to my ear, and the sound of my son's voice sliced straight through me. His pauses were longer than his sentences, his tone rehearsed as if he had practiced this betrayal in front of a mirror. He stumbled once, but then steadied himself. "Clara doesn't think it's a good idea. She thinks you'll make the wedding uncomfortable. It's better if you don't come." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My grip tightened until the phone was slick in my palm. The kitchen clock ticked loud enough to drown his words, but I heard them anyway. Better if I wasn't there. My only child, the boy I had raised with scraped knees and restless nights, had chosen the easier path, erasing me with one clean cut. I forced my voice into something calm, steady, something motherly. I didn't ask why. I didn't beg. I didn't let the break in my chest show through. I said something faint, something he could accept without guilt. And then, when the line went dead, I stood in my quiet kitchen staring at the invitation pinned on the refrigerator door, the edges curled just slightly from the heat, the elegant script spelling out a future that no longer had room for me. My hand shook as I reached for it. I could have ripped it down the middle, could have crushed it in my fist until the paper tore like skin. Instead, I eased the magnet aside, slid the invitation free, folded it once, and tucked it into the drawer beneath the counter. Not destroyed, not forgiven, just hidden, waiting. That was the only strength I had left at that moment, refusing to let it end there. The silence in the house pressed close around me. I poured a glass of wine, watching the dark liquid swirl, and tried to swallow the bitterness that lodged in my throat. But it wasn't just the sting of exclusion that cut so deep. It was the way his words echoed with someone else's hand guiding them. Clara. She had been at his shoulder even when she wasn't in the room. I could still see her face from the last dinner we'd shared before the engagement party. She had smiled at Ryan, but when her eyes flicked toward me, the expression changed, icy, sharp, triumphant. Not the nervous glance of a young bride overwhelmed by details, but the cold stare of someone who had won. That look had unsettled me then. Tonight, after his call, it seared itself into memory. I set the glass down untouched and pressed my palms flat on the counter, trying to anchor myself. The betrayal wasn't only in his words, it was in the way he carried her judgment like it was his own. I had carried him through fevers and heartbreak, through years when it was just us against the world. And now, with one sentence, he had pushed me outside the walls of his new life. I opened the drawer again and stared at the folded invitation resting on top of old receipts and rubber bands. I thought about tearing it now, thought about making a clean break to match his. But I couldn't. Some part of me refused to give her that victory. This wasn't finished. Not for me. Not for him. The house creaked as the night settled in, but I couldn't shake that last image. Clara's eyes, cool and calculating, watching me the way a victor watches the defeated. She hadn't just asked for me to be absent. She wanted me erased. And I understood, with a clarity that burned. She thought she had done it. She thought she had won. But she didn't know me well enough yet. That night, I drove through the quiet streets to Eleanor's house, the soft glow of her porch light pulling me in like a harbor. She opened the door before I even knocked, reading the storm on my face the way only a sister can. Eleanor had always been my counterbalance, 3 years younger, sharper at the edges. The one who burned hot when I tended to hold everything in. I sank into the chair across from her kitchen table and told her everything. The phone call, the words that had lodged like shards in my chest. She slammed her hand down hard enough to rattle the mugs on the counter. Adeline, you spent half your life exposing liars in courtrooms. You unraveled men who thought they were untouchable. And now you're letting a girl half your age push you out of your own family? I tried to reason with her, but the words felt hollow even as I said them. If Ryan believes I'm the problem, if he thinks his life will be easier without me... She cut me off, leaning forward, eyes blazing. That's exactly why you can't sit back. This isn't about ego. It's about truth. Don't think of it as revenge. Think of it as saving him before he's dragged under. Her conviction stung and steadied me at the same time. I wanted to argue, but the iron certainty in her voice pressed against something raw inside me. Eleanor softened only slightly, reaching for my hand. You don't see it yet, but this is bigger than a wedding. He's blind. Adeline. And you're the only one who can open his eyes. As I gathered my coat to leave, she added almost casually, Funny thing, someone at the firm mentioned Clara the other week, said she disappears at lunch all the time. Same hour, like clockwork. Nobody knows where she goes. Eleanor shrugged, but her eyes told me she didn't believe for a second it was nothing. That single detail caught fire in me, a spark snapping against dry kindling. My sister had lit a fuse I could no longer ignore. By morning, the determination Eleanor had planted had grown roots. I sat at my desk with coffee gone cold, sifting through public records the way I once sifted through case files. It didn't take long. The name jumped off the page at me, bold and undeniable. Clara Thompson listed on the lease for a luxury apartment in the heart of Boston. The air left my lungs. Ryan had never mentioned anything about Clara keeping a place there. Why would she need it? They already had a shared lease on a townhouse for after the wedding. What was she hiding that required an address he didn't even know about? That afternoon, I drove into the city. The building loomed with polished glass and guarded entrances, a place that whispered exclusivity. I parked across the street, hiding behind a newspaper as if I were a stranger in my own life. My pulse thudded in my ears as I fixed my eyes on the revolving doors. At exactly 12:15, Clara appeared, right on schedule. She wore a beige coat that swung neatly at her knees, a designer bag looped over one arm. She wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a man in his late 40s, maybe 50s, with the crisp confidence of someone used to expensive suits and expensive secrets. They moved close, too close for mere colleagues, and when his hand brushed the small of her back, it wasn't tentative, it was practiced. I froze, holding my breath as if that could keep me invisible. My phone trembled in my hand as I lifted it just high enough to snap a few blurry shots through the windshield. Each click felt like a betrayal and a lifeline all at once. They disappeared inside, but not before I noticed something small that changed everything. On the bank of mailboxes by the door, her name was etched neatly on one slot, and beside it, a corporate logo I recognized. A finance firm notorious for shady deals, one I remembered from years back in court, accused of selling fraudulent projects to desperate investors. The bile rose in my throat. Clara wasn't just sneaking around with a man she shouldn't. She had ties to money that smelled of rot. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was something darker, something that threatened to pull Ryan into a world he couldn't see coming. As I sat there gripping the phone with my grainy photos, one thought crystallized in my mind, sharper than grief, sharper than anger. If I didn't follow this trail to the end, my son would pay the price, and I wasn't about to let that happen. I began following Clara with purpose, no longer dismissing my unease as paranoia. Patterns emerged quickly. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she left her office at 11:50 sharp, dressed impeccably in tailored suits that looked as though they had been chosen to impress someone other than my son. I trailed her car through the congested streets of Boston until she parked near Copley Square. She walked briskly into a small cafe tucked between boutiques, the kind of place where executives met for discreet conversations. I slipped in behind her, choosing a table close enough to catch fragments of her voice. She wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man in his 50s, sharp suit, gold cufflinks glinting under the light. His wedding band was plain, unremarkable, but unmistakably there. He leaned forward, hand curling around hers with the ease of a man who'd done it countless times. Clara didn't pull away. She leaned in too, eyes bright, her laugh soft and conspiratorial. I pretended to scroll through my phone, but my ears strained at every word. I caught one sentence, low and intimate. That chilled me to the bone. After the wedding, everything will be ours. My pulse thudded as I discreetly lifted my phone and snapped a picture just as he slid a small Tiffany's box across the table. Clara opened it, a smile spreading as she pressed her cheek against his shoulder like a lover claiming her prize. I left before my anger betrayed me. My hands shook on the steering wheel the entire drive home. By the time I walked into my kitchen, I could barely breathe from the weight of what I had witnessed. Still, I reached for the phone, dialing Ryan with trembling fingers. "Your fiancé," I began, my voice breaking. "I saw her with another man. They weren't just talking. Ryan. I have proof." He cut me off, sharp and furious. "Mom, stop. You've done this my whole life, picking apart everyone I love, finding flaws until there's nothing left. I can't take it anymore." The line went dead. I stood there with the phone pressed against my ear, listening to silence. My son believed I was the enemy, not the woman conspiring to betray him. That realization sank like lead into my chest. I wasn't just shut out of his wedding. I was being pushed out of his life. The following week, my suspicion pulled me back into the city. I parked near Clara's office, engine off, waiting. The minutes dragged until I saw her step out, heels clicking against the pavement, coat draped elegantly over her shoulders. She moved with the confidence of someone who thought she was untouchable. I stayed several paces behind as she ducked into a narrow alley. She glanced around once, then pulled out her phone. Her voice dropped, urgent and quick. I crept closer, heart hammering, just enough to catch words carried on the breeze. "Once he signs, every cent of his savings goes straight into your project. After the honeymoon, we'll leave. You know he always does what I tell him." I pressed my phone to record. The audio faint but clear enough. My knees nearly buckled at the implication. This wasn't an affair of passion. It was a setup, a marriage constructed as a trap. That night, I sat at my desk, digging through old case files, searching for anything that could confirm my dread. Buried in digital records. I found it, a draft of a financial power of attorney with Ryan's name typed neatly on the signature line. Blank and waiting. Clara had prepared everything. I leaned back, staring at the screen until the words blurred. She wasn't just planning to betray him emotionally. She meant to strip him of every dollar, every piece of security he had worked for. As I tried to steady my breathing, Eleanor's voice echoed in my head. "Don't think of it as revenge. Think of it as saving him." Then another fragment of Clara's alleyway call replayed in my mind, her mention of California, a job already secured, a move already planned. She wasn't only stealing his money. She was planning to uproot him entirely, cut him off from the only roots he had left, me, our home, our history. The pieces locked together with terrifying precision, the hidden apartment in Boston, the married man with expensive gifts, the power of attorney poised for Ryan's signature. It wasn't infidelity alone. It was a calculated scheme, a financial and emotional snare disguised as marriage. I sat in the darkened room, my hands clenched into fists. Clara thought she had secured her victory, but for the first time since Ryan's call, I felt something stronger than grief swelling in me, determination. Because if my son couldn't see the truth, then I would drag it into the light myself. I put the recording on the kitchen table like an accusation. The photo sat next to it, grainy and small but enough, Clara laughing, his hand at the small of her back. When Ryan walked in, he carried the day's errands on his shoulders, oblivious to the earthquake I was about to set off. "Listen," I said, and played the clip. Her voice, clipped and cool, promising money shifted like a hand closing around a door. She sounded practiced, casual, none of the shame that belongs to a secret affair. I watched his face while the words leaked into the room. For a beat, he studied the phone as if it were a stranger. Then something else swelled, irritation that spread into anger. "Mom," he said, voice tight. "I don't know when you became this person who digs through people's lives. She's my fiancée." His jaw worked like he was deciding whether to be patient. He decided not to be. "I'm not trying to destroy anything," I said. "I'm trying to protect you. You don't understand what I—" He slammed his hand on the counter, hard enough that a jar of spoons rattled. "No, you don't get to make that call for me. If you keep this up, if you make a scene, if you keep accusing her, then I will cut you off. I will end this. I can't keep explaining my life to you." The threat landed like a blow. My son was threatening to erase me from his life as if I were the interloper. For a moment, the kitchen seemed too small. The photographs on the wall, our graduations, his messy sixth-grade portrait, turning into relics of a life someone might sweep away. He took a breath and stood straighter, as if he needed his distance to be certain. "I love her," he said, quieter. "Why can't you accept that?" The plea in his voice was real and desperate, but it carried Clara with it like a weight. When the door shut behind him, it felt final in a way I hadn't been prepared for. I sat there with the phone and the photo and the recording, and the only sound was my own breathing catching at edges. He believed her. He had chosen to believe her over me, and that choice was a split I could feel down to the bone. I should have felt defeated, maybe I did, but something else began to rise in my chest. It wasn't vengeance. It was a stubbornness that had kept me standing through divorce papers and sleepless nights. He had given me a deadline by threat. He had shown me that I was alone in this. Alone or not, I had a job to do. The follow-up was not impulsive. It was methodical. I started tracking her times, her routes, the small patterns that make a life visible. On a Thursday afternoon, I followed her into the city and watched her vanish into the building that housed her Boston apartment. She didn't reappear for hours. My chest tightened with the knowledge that the quiet I'd been hearing had a reason. When she finally came out, it was with the man again, no haste, no guilt. They walked with the practiced intimacy of two co-conspirators. I recorded everything: faces, a license plate, the exact time she entered and left. I stamped those timestamps into my head like coordinates on a map I intended to follow. On my way home, I stopped at a local print shop under the pretense of making copies. The fluorescent hum and the smell of toner were a strange comfort. They were ordinary things in a world that suddenly required extraordinary proof. At the counter, I caught sight of a folder someone had accidentally left behind. My legal instincts didn't let me ignore it. I slipped it open. There it was, an almost complete power of attorney form with Ryan's name typed in the signature block and the details filled out: bank transfers, authorization to manage investment accounts, language that would allow one person to move funds without a second thought. Whoever had drafted it had left only one thing, the signature. I folded my hands around the paper until the edges bit into my palm. It confirmed the worst-case scenario. She intended to have him sign something that would hand control of his finances away. The thought of his life savings moved at the mercy of another's signature made my stomach drop. I drove home feeling the weight of the past press on my shoulders. Photographs of his Little League games, diplomas, the chipped mug he'd given me on Mother's Day when he was 12. All of it felt vulnerable now, as though someone could erase the past with the stroke of a pen and the promise of a new address on the West Coast. Then the phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed. Her voice was quick, urgent. "A friend at the bank called me," she said without preamble. "They've had inquiries. Clara's already been talking about opening a joint account in California, listing them as the Mercers. If she succeeds, the legal bindings make it harder to reverse transfers. She's covering her tracks." Hearing it out loud made the plan feel less theoretical and more imminent. They weren't just scheming for a hidden apartment or a lover's tryst. They were setting up a legal architecture to transfer my son's life into someone else's hands. It was precise, clinical, and utterly ruthless. I looked at the faded family photos on my mantle and thought about what would be left if those images were all that remained. I thought of Ryan's easy laugh and the way he never let me carry a heavy bag. I listened to the silence and felt the resoluteness settle into me like armor. If he would not believe me, then I would have to build the proof so blatant the world could not ignore it. If he would not open his eyes, I would force them open. I placed the folder and the photos on the counter and whispered into the dim kitchen, not to anyone in particular, but to the night itself. If he won't see the truth, then I will make it impossible for anyone to miss. Napa Valley glowed like a painting come to life. Rows of vineyards rolled into the distance, bathed in molten gold from the sinking sun. White tables shimmered under linen cloths. Glasses caught the light like prisms, and the low hum of jazz wrapped around the chatter of well-dressed guests. It was the kind of scene designed to impress, the sort of perfection people posted online to prove their lives were charmed. I slipped into that world cloaked in anonymity, a navy dress that whispered understated elegance, a camera slung across my shoulder. I smiled faintly at guests as I moved among them, nodding like one of the hired professionals brought in to document someone else's dream. In reality, I was there to record the nightmare waiting behind the curtain. When Ryan and Clara stepped under the floral arch, the crowd hushed with reverence. He looked radiant, eyes shining with a devotion that pierced me. My chest ached watching him promise his future to a woman who had already bartered it away. The officiant's words floated on the breeze. Commitment, honor, forever. Each vow pressed down heavier than the last, a weight of lies disguised as sacred truth. Applause erupted when they kissed, and I forced myself to raise the camera, capturing the moment the world believed was love. Inside, something twisted. I wanted to scream, to drag Ryan away, to shout every ugly secret I knew. Instead, I swallowed the fire. This wasn't the time to speak. It was the time to collect the final piece of proof. The reception spilled into laughter and champagne. Music swelled as guests clinked glasses and toasted the perfect couple. Then I saw it. Clara whispering to a bridesmaid, smoothing her dress, and excusing herself with a coy smile. She slipped through the doors as if heading to the powder room. My pulse spiked. I knew better. I followed at a distance, weaving through the hall, pushing out into the evening air. The vineyard was quiet, a hushed contrast to the merriment behind me, and there, between two rows of vines gilded by dusk, I found her. Clara melted into the arms of the older man, her head tilting back as if she had been starving for him all along. Their kiss was long, unashamed, the kiss of people who had forgotten the world existed. My breath hitched, but my hands were steady. I lifted the camera and pressed the shutter again and again, each click etching betrayal into permanence. Through the lens, I watched the truth unfold. No rumors, no suspicions, just raw evidence no one could deny. The sky burned orange and violet behind them, romantic and damning all at once. They pulled closer, her fingers curling into his lapel, his hand possessive at her waist. Every second felt like confirmation of everything I'd unearthed. The final nail in the coffin she thought she had built for me, hidden in the shadows. I whispered to the vines, to the camera, to myself. If Ryan refuses to see it, then the whole world will. The hotel room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and cheap soap. Through the curtains, I could still hear laughter and the clink of glasses from the reception below, a distant river of celebration that had no idea a different tide was rising. I set my camera bag on the bed, booted the aging laptop I'd brought just in case, and opened the files I had accumulated like evidence in a case file. Photos, audio snippets, the little time-stamped clips that had felt meaningless on their own, but, when threaded together, would tell the story with ruthless clarity. I worked methodically. The first clip I dropped in was the ceremony, Ryan's face as he listened, the slow, weighted cadence of vows that promised honor and faithfulness. I let the phrase hang, "I promise to love you, honor you." A soft breath of music, exactly the ballad playing earlier, rose under it, warm and sincere. Then, with a clean cut, I placed the vineyard footage over the music, Clara and the man, their silhouettes pressed together against the dying sun. The juxtaposition made my skin prickle. The song that had sanctified their union now underscored its undoing. I spent an hour refining the edit, trimming the edges, matching the beats so that the betrayal hit right where the audience's stomach would twist. I added subtle title cards, dates, times, and a single line that pointed the finger not at rumor but at fact. I didn't write accusations. I provided documentation. The intention was to make disbelief impossible. When I uploaded it, I used an account that drew no attention to my name, a throwaway email, a masked profile. I typed a simple caption and a couple of hashtags and hit publish. For a few minutes, nothing happened but the small blue ring of the loading icon. Then the first comment, and the first share, and then a cascade of notifications I could barely keep up with. Wedding truth trended within the hour. Strangers began to stitch together their own breadcrumbs, an alumni connection here, a bridesmaid's remark there, and before midnight the clip had been posted on local news feeds. My phone exploded. Ryan called again and again until the calls went to voicemail. Clara's email arrived, urgent and pleading, demanding the video be taken down. Eleanor's text blinked across my screen, short and incredulous. "Everyone's talking. The town is buzzing." But the ripple I had anticipated soon widened. The older man, his name surfaced within 2 hours after someone questioned him, wasn't just a wealthy lover. He was tied to a firm my memory flagged, a company that showed up in court documents once before, the one with a history of murky investments. People started digging. Journalists and former clients called. Within a day, there were whispers of inquiries and the first tentative statements from regulatory bodies. The same money trail I had noticed in the mailbox at his Boston building was now under suspicion, and it pointed straight back to the paper I had seen at the print shop, the nearly completed power of attorney. Watching the playback over and over, the room shrinking to the glow of the screen, I felt a complicated thing settle inside me. There was no exultation, only a cold, abiding clarity. This had begun as a private attempt to save my son from a lie that would cost him everything, and it had become something larger, a public unspooling of a scheme that reached beyond our family. My phone vibrated again. This time, instead of a frantic call, it was a stream of articles, shares, and commentators who suddenly had the question on every tongue. How did a perfect wedding hide such a plan? I watched strangers parsing the timestamps I'd included, seeing what I had hoped they would see. In the hush of that hotel room, with the world outside rearranging itself around the proof I'd chosen to reveal, I breathed out and whispered to the empty bed and the glowing screen, "This is not just revenge. This is justice." 2 days later, Clara appeared at my door. Her face was hollow, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights and the thousands of cruel comments that had followed her every move online. "You turned me into a national joke," she choked, her voice raw. I met her gaze, steady. "No, you did that to yourself. All I did was show the truth." Her composure cracked, tears spilling. "I never felt good enough when you looked at me. I just wanted control so no one could see how weak I was." I stayed silent. For the first time, I saw not the manipulator, but a small, broken woman crushed beneath her own lies. Ryan entered quietly, hearing everything. When Clara fled, he turned and wrapped his arms around me, trembling. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was blind. I chose wrong." I held him close, whispering, "You came back. That's all that matters." That evening, laughter filled my kitchen again. And I knew, truth may shatter a wedding, but sometimes it saves a life.